is, again, I'll be facilitating today's session. We have closed captioning that has been activated, and let me check to see if folks can see the closed captioning. Is it visible? Yeah, okay, perfect. And then we also have interpretation into Spanish, and let me ask Julie if she can give the instructions in Spanish on this one. Julie?
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm gonna do this announcement in English and then in Spanish, okay? So very soon, as you see on the image, in a few seconds at the bottom of your screen, you're gonna see a globe icon. You'll click there and it should allow you access to the interpretation and to select the language of your preference, which is in this case will be English. And if you're on a smartphone or on a tablet, you should locate the three dots and then click there and it should allow you access to the interpretation. Hola, bienvenidos a su reunión. En unos segunditos, en la parte inferior de su pantalla, va a ver el icono de un globo terráqueo. Le hace clic ahí y le va a poder dar acceso a la interpretación y a seleccionar el idioma de su preferencia, que en este caso sería el español. Y si está en un teléfono inteligente o en una tableta, busque 3 puntitos o la palabra more, le hace clic ahí y también va a poder acceder, a la interpretación y escoger el idioma de su preferencia. Muchas gracias y que disfruten su reunión. Thank you and enjoy your meeting.
If you're you're bilingual, do you still have to click one of those?
No, if you're bilingual, you can just the meeting will be happening in English. So if you're going to use English, you can you don't have to use the interpretation. Right. Okay. So thank you again, and I'm going to ask if folks can mute themselves so that we can keep the external sounds from coming in. It'll help the interpreter be able to hear clearly and convey the information. All right. Why are we here today? We're here for two important reasons. The first is to update you all about some important ongoing efforts to increase political representation for our communities, Black, Indigenous, people of color, low-income communities on the LA City Council. So that's one purpose. There's been a lot of work, certainly since March, and we want to update you all on all the incredibly important work happening. The second reason is to start engaging you on the next level efforts that we are planning through this coalition to improve City Hall responsiveness for our communities as well. So again, these two reasons bring us together. And the agenda for today is this. So we're going to spend about 25 minutes today providing you with an update where we're going to provide you with more background on the coalition in case this is your first time. We'll also talk about the themes that came up from the March convening. I see some of you here on the list were involved in the March convenings. So we want to highlight what themes came out of those sessions. Also, we want to highlight the findings that came out of the survey as well. Next, we want to also talk about the recommendations, how the convening themes and the survey findings fed into the recommendations from the work groups. And then finally, we'll talk about future actions. So we've got about 20 minutes worth of lots of information for you. And then we'll spend about 15 or 20 minutes in small groups where you'll be able to ask questions, share reactions, and clarify what the next steps are that we want to undertake to really take action on behalf of our communities. So with that, I want to invite Pastor Eddie, Reverend Eddie Anderson from South LA Regional, a South LA Regional organizer for LA Voice, to share some welcoming thoughts and also provide some more background information about RLA. So Pastor Eddie.
Thank you, Rigo, and thank all of you for being here in the space. You're doing the greatest job, which is being a informed citizen. And so RLA, how do we get here and what are we doing together? I'm Pastor Eddie with LA Voice. And we are here because we heard the tapes. We're here because 7 out of 15 LA City Council people have been removed and there's been some deep wounds. And we realize that we need a government for the people, by the people, and that what we have right now is not working. And so the best way to get the system to change is to change the rules. We heard some of your concerns earlier, and now we're back to talk about how can we change the rules in collaboration, that when community gets together, we can do a great thing. Next slide, please. And so we got together with all of you. You represent a multiracial, multi-generational, multi-intersectional coalition community. You represent the folks who are closest to the pain, the folks who know what we need, the community voice that we need to hear to build power, to build solidarity, to demand transparency and structural reform in the LA City Charter. We haven't seen this in about 20 years or 25 years, really. And so this is a pivotal, critical moment. And so we're so glad that you are here with us. And our coalition is grand. It spans, tries to bring in everyone in the coalition in the rainbow together. You see the names there, AAPI Equity, Cheerla, California Native Vote, LA Can, LA Forward, LA Voice, Inner City Struggle, COCO in the house, CD Tech, Tanis, California, California Black Power Network, ABC. If you're representing those organizations, put it in the chat. Let us know you're here. We're so glad you're here, and let's continue the conversation. I'm going to pass it to Candace to share some objectives.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Candace Cho. My pronouns are she, her. I work at AAPI Equity Alliance. We are a coalition of over 40 community-based organizations who serve and represent some of the most vulnerable Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in LA County. That means that includes LA City. And we're here, or rather I'm here, because in the time that I've lived in LA, I've lived in 2 council districts, and 100% of my council members have been charged with federal crimes, and 1 has been convicted and 1 pled guilty to those crimes. So it's pretty obvious to me that we need a change, and that change needs to happen at the most fundamental level, which is in the structure of our government. So a little bit about our LA, the group that's here today, and our goals. You can see them here. We have 4 of them. 1 is to have this conversation with all of you to identify what are our priorities for seeing the change that we need to see in the LA City Council and city government. 2 is to develop an agenda, a set of ideas based on that community feedback that we're receiving at this session, at the sessions that you'll hear about that are happening across the city all this month, at the in-person sessions that you may have been at earlier this year. 3 is that we're going to take all of your ideas and our ideas and take the agenda, the ideas that we thought up with, and we're going to engage with the city council on these ideas. And we actually did that today. The city council met to talk about structural reform, and so many of the people in this room showed up to be heard. And finally, if we actually succeed in getting the city council to propose some meaningful change to our government and put it on the ballot for either this coming March or November, then we're going to have to get out the vote. So the battle doesn't stop, or the fight doesn't stop with the city council. Next slide, please. So what's been happening since that leaked racist conversation? On the city council side, the city council did what governments usually do. They formed a committee in order to figure it out, to take the lead to figure it out. So there's this committee called, it's called an ad hoc committee. That means it's not permanent, it's just temporary. And they're focused on city governance reform. In other words, they're focused on changing the way the city is run, and specifically the city council. And you can see some of the members of that committee listed there. They're all council members. My council member is there, Heather Hutt. She represents Council District 10. Hello, fellow CD10 constituents. And this committee has been focused on looking at two big ideas. One idea is to create an independent redistricting commission. The other idea is to expand the size of the city council. And you're going to hear a lot about both of these ideas tonight. And the reason why we've called them charter reform is because the charter is basically the name of the city's constitution. So in order to do these two big reforms, you have to amend the city's constitution. Next slide, please. So what have we been doing here at our LA? Well, we've been having this conversation together with all of you in your communities, in our spaces. So we stood up 5 convenings in the month of March. 1 was online, just like this one, and 4 were in person, in which over 200 of you participated and told us what kinds of changes you want to see to make sure that our city government truly represents and reflects us. We've also been hanging out with the City Council's ad hoc committee. That committee has hosted several in-person, what they call listening sessions throughout the city. So we've been showing up at those listening sessions and telling them what we're hearing from all of you. And then finally, we also separated ourselves into 2 groups, into 2 committees, in order to study the 2 big issues that are kind of up in getting everyone's attention: the Independent Redistricting Commission and growing the size of the City Council. So now I'm going to pass it to Rigo to tell you more about some of those ideas.
Thank you, Candace. As Candace mentioned, this work that the coalition is doing really is driven by you, residents who are involved, who, as Pastor Eddie said, feel the pain. We feel the pain. And so the coalition is really committed to making sure that your voice is the basis for any kind of recommendation. And so in March and April, there were 2 kinds of work that happened. Again, one were those convenings, those in-person convenings. And then secondly, the survey. And so what I'm going to cover is what stood out in terms of the convenings where you all came together across these different places in LA. And then we'll talk about the survey findings as well. So for the Independent Redistricting Commission, that's the IRC, 4 themes came up. The first is you told us very, very clearly that when it comes to the application, the selection of commissioners, to public hearings, to drawing those final maps, a racial and economic equity lens needs to be used. In other words, we need to make sure that people who are typically marginalized and not allowed to be part of this, that we always focus on making sure that every step of the way involves our communities. And the second is that we have to make sure that everything that's stated as we promote the independent redistricting recruitment process, that there is a message that says our community belongs on this commission. We heard from some of the themes that sometimes people just don't feel from our communities that they actually belong on the commission. And so we want to make it clear that yes, our community should be at the seat. The third theme was that we need to really do things differently as we inform and engage people, so that the very process of informing and engaging our communities is also an empowering process for our community. The fourth theme that came up was that we need to make sure that there is a partnering and there is resource available for us to continue to work with trusted messengers. What we heard was from the participants is that there are already organizations, namely the ones that you saw on that slide earlier, that already have built a lot of trust with our community. And so those were the 4 key themes that came up around the Independent Redistricting Commission. The themes that came up around seat expansion were these. We presented 3 options, the current system, and we try to look at what are the strengths and what are the concerns with the current system. We also looked at what are the strengths and weaknesses of a multi-member district, and then what are the strengths and weaknesses or concerns of adding more districts. I don't have the time right now to go through the details of each. I just want to point out that the feedback, the ideas were very, very rich. And the work group that Jeremy will talk about later on took all of this information and from there developed some recommendations for your consideration today. So those were the key themes that came up around the Independent Redistricting Commission, as well as the LA City Council seat expansion. And let me now turn it over to David, who's going to share with us what the survey revealed. Remember that there were about 200 or so people that participated across the convenings, and one could argue that it's just 200 people that are dissatisfied, right? So the survey reached out to more people just to see what other people were also thinking within our communities. And so let's see what David is going to share with us. David?
Thank you so much, Rigo. My name is David, and I'm a data analyst at Catalyst California, and I'm excited to present to you all about the findings from the survey. As part of this work, we did ask you about your attitudes on how well LA City Council represents you and your opinion on the two potential reform measures that were discussed, and that is the creation of the Independent Redistricting Commission and expanding the number of city council members. The method for the survey included a snowball sampling method, in which RLA partners distributed the survey through convenings in which some of you may have participated in. The languages for the survey were translated into Spanish, Chinese, and a few other languages. And a total of 2,518 surveys were taken, in which we screened out respondents who only lived in LA and were 18 and older. So that resulted in only 1,067 surveys completing and passing the data screening. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to present to you all about the three major findings from the survey. And the first major finding from the survey is that people do not feel represented by LA City Council, and they want greater representation. So the visual here that you see in this slide is the percent of people by race who feel that LA City Council does not take action on their needs. And as you can see, people of color, in particular Black respondents, feel that LA City Council does not take action on their needs compared to white people, right? And as you can see from the quote as well, people like Mika, who is a Native American woman, they want more equitable representation in city council, especially from those that come from tribal communities. Next slide, please. The second major finding from the survey is that survey respondents support the Independent Redistricting Commission, and they think that it can make a difference on the representation. So what you see here in the slide is the visual of the percent of people by how they feel an RSC would affect the representation in terms of their identity, which is the first bar, their interest, the second bar, and then their needs, the third bar. And as I know there's a lot of colors and numbers thrown at you, but I want you to focus mostly on the two darker shades of purple, which represents the very positive effect and slight positive effect category. And as you can see, a majority of respondents, I believe an RSC could have a positive effect on the representation in terms of identity, their interests and needs. And people of color, such as Ricardo, believe that people of color would benefit from having resources such as monetary compensation and childcare services in order to fully participate in an independent redistricting commission. Next slide, please. And overall, survey respondents support LA City seat expansion and are hopeful about the effect of representation. As you can see from the visual, more than half of people support expanding LA City Council. While there were some concerns about the operational cost of expansion and whether expansion would create change, nevertheless, people were hopeful about the positive impact of council expansion. And I wanted to summarize what I just said, because I know I threw a lot of stuff at you, but the overall results show that respondents, they lack representation in LA City Council, and overwhelmingly have hope that the two reforms that were discussed, the creation of the RSC and the LA City seat expansion, would have a positive effect on the representation in LA City Council. And I'm going to turn it over back to Rigo, who will speak on the work group recommendations.
Thank you, David. So a lot of the sentiments that we heard in the in-person convenings with the 200 or so people also resonated with a larger group. And so all of that information was shared with 2 work groups that started to develop some recommendations. So now I'm gonna turn it over to Maria, who's going to talk about the recommendations around the Independent Redistricting Commission. But before I do that, let me see, Christian, did we drop the link to these slides in the chat box?
I will drop them right now, and we just got a request to make the screen bigger. So if you could do that too, Rigo, that'd be good.
Okay, does this work like that? Is this bigger? Does that help? Okay, so then the slides, you'll be able to access them in the chat box. And so with that, let's go to Maria.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Maria. I'm here representing California Native Vote Project, part of the coalition. So in service and advocacy for you all as community members, first of all, I want to say thank you for all your input in the surveys, being here present with us. It matters to us, and we want to make sure that we've done due diligence and putting all the information together in the following primary goals. What we did as an IRC group is that we developed a set of recommendations after looking at some of the findings that we found from the surveys, the different conversations that we had with you all, and the different conversations across the city and all the convenings. And we went ahead and analyzed and looked at that and discussed amongst ourselves some recommendations after our own research. I want to go ahead and highlight right now some of those primary goals that we have presented here for you in these slides. Our Independent Redistricting Commission work group felt that it was really important to center the following goals. We want to make sure that we eliminate any type of barrier for any one of you to be able to apply for commissions and future redistricting process. This is one of the things that you all also recommended throughout the different surveys and communities, and what we heard loud and clear. Also, we want to recommended that we ensure the commissions reflect LA's diverse population, the cultures, language, and all the socioeconomic groups that we all represent here in Los Angeles. We want to make sure that we secure sufficient funding, resources, and staffing that includes training, implementation, timeline at each stage of the redistricting process, so that you all or anyone that wants to apply through this process or be part of this leadership is following sufficient training, information, unpacking, and really getting to know what this is about, because many of you said that you would want to be part of that process, but there were some barriers that we needed to get in front of. We also want to make sure that in our recommendation is that we continue to partner with some of the organizations that are here today, and that we also fund some of those, that we also fund some of those community organizations to lead education, outreach, and mobilization efforts. That would also include political education and anything that the stakeholders need in order to really understand what we're doing here. Lastly, and before we go into the last 2 recommendations, is that we want to make sure that we codify, that we are transparent, that we're accountable, and that we value and center equity, inclusion of all, and that we are making sure that that is being driven across everything that we do. In our LAUSD, specifically asking for a redistricting separate commission, is that we're asking specifically for us to center the youth and parent or caregivers by participating in this redistricting process. What that means is that we would make a process invitation, an opportunity for youth or parents to participate, and we would also make sure that we follow some recommendations and best practices in parent engagement and youth engagement. We want to make sure that all our youth have the opportunity to be represented and have a voice in decision-making in the city of Los Angeles. Those are some of the recommendations that we made. We want our city to create a truly dignified and transparency, accountability opportunity for us all. And so those were some of the recommendations we made today in the ad hoc committee, and we will continue to enhance some of these recommendations as we hear from you all in the next convenings throughout the next few weeks. That is the presentation highlighting some of our primary goals from our work group.
Thank you so much, Maria. Let's go over to the recommendations for the council seat expansion, and I'll turn it over to Jeremy.
Thank you, Rigo. Hi, everyone. My name is Jeremy Payne. I am the Senior Policy Analyst with Catalyst California, and I'm here representing RLA's Council Expansion Work Group, and we'll be presenting our initial recommendations on council expansion that we hope and believe will help ensure more equitable representation in Los Angeles. Council expansion, if done with equity and marginalized communities in mind and at the forefront, presents a unique opportunity to restore trust in City Hall and strengthen political representation for BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, and low-income communities in Los Angeles. With that in mind, RLA recommends expanding Los Angeles City Council between 23 to 31 single-member districts, and I will kind of talk about why we arrived at that number, but first, let me just say at 23 council districts, there is an opportunity to create plurality council districts for both Black and API communities. And this is something that is unachievable with our existing model of 15 council members in the city of Los Angeles. And a plurality council district means that Black and API communities, or the Black and API communities, would be the largest share of the population, even if not the majority. So if they're not 50% plus one or anything like that, they're still the largest population subgroup of that district, which would be a impactful and meaningful thing in terms of both political representation as well as the makeup of those communities and the services and the priorities of that community. There's also an opportunity at the size of 23 council districts to create 3 additional majority and plurality districts for Latinx communities. Thinking holistically about the communities that we are working with, we wanted to make sure that we were thinking holistically about the shared kind of benefits of expanding our council district without jeopardizing or harming any one particular community's power or representation. And we set a threshold of no more than 31 council member districts because any number above 31 council districts, historically and linguistically dense Asian communities like Koreatown face threats of being divided, which would undermine the intentional efforts to uplift and build power within our API communities. And some of the kind of background on this comes from the community feedback that we received, the available research on council expansion, and district modeling we're able to do to really speculate what future council sizes could look like in Los Angeles. So we looked at districts of 23 and overlaid them in the city of Los Angeles and did that all the way up to 31 plus to really understand what would be some of the nuances and impacts for population shifts, thinking beyond the density and thinking more so about what our communities actually need and what are the concerns and views of city council and how we can make sure that our council is working better in alignment with us. But I want to acknowledge that our recommended range is just an initial recommendation. So we may narrow or widen that range as we continue to do more district modeling, which is kind of like a line mapping exercise, as well as hearing from residents like you here to share about what this would mean for your communities. So that is one kind of acknowledgement. And the other one is that there may be alternative models of governance that could be more effective at meeting our goals and vision, such as multi-member districts or at-large districts, which would be a hybrid system for the city of Los Angeles. Rigo shared a little bit about some of those survey things, and you can see some of that in the slides that he shared. But for RLA, more time is needed to conduct research and reach an informed recommendation on those models. So for the time being, we are just recommending 23 to 31 single member council districts. Next slide, Rigo. Thank you. In addition to our recommendation, we wanted to set values of what council expansion should achieve. So it's not undermining kind of the work that went into the RLA process of meeting with you and bringing your needs, perspectives, and lived experiences to the council expansion conversation. And so we are urging Los Angeles City Council to consider the following 4 values of equitable council expansion so we can think in terms of racial equity as well as socioeconomic equity across the board for Los Angeles residents. So in terms of what that means, council expansion should effectively shift power and strengthen political representation of impacted communities. Talking about BIPOC and low-income Angelenos, those that have been historically shut out of the decision-making processes of City Hall, we want to make sure that we are bringing power back to those communities and power to communities that have never seen such political power in our kind of recent times. Number two is kind of significantly minimizing and preventing harm to any impacted communities' political power and representation. And I bring this up because when it comes to council expansion, it's essentially rearranging puzzle pieces on a giant board. And we want to make sure that we are being mindful and cognizant of how one shift can impact another community. And we're being very intentional about always observing kind of how these fine detail and movements can shift political power for another community. And so being mindful of what that looks like for Black Angelenos, for our Latinx community and our API communities throughout Los Angeles, as well as our indigenous communities, our renters, as well as our geographically displaced communities that don't have some of those density clusters that allow them to really reap the benefits of traditional council expansion. We also have a value point of that council expansion should lead to structural change that eliminates systemic barriers to representation. You and I here both know, so I'm probably preaching to the choir, that there are many barriers that have prevented us from participating and being a part of the decision-making, from City Hall meetings being during the day when many of us have day jobs and jobs that we're not able to contribute, the lack of childcare that's provided at these meetings. These are systemic barriers that have been in place that have made it harder for us to not only be a part of the decision-making process, but to be represented and even run for office and be one of the council members in the City Hall that we have. The last equity point that we have here is that we want to make sure that we are creating opportunities that center the needs and participation of impacted and underrepresented communities. Again, I've been talking a lot about the decision-making processes, how council members determine everything from the budgets to services and everything that goes into how everything's being operated to you as a resident calling your council member, hoping to get something done in your community and being shut out or being ignored. We want to make sure that we are rethinking the role of council members. And when it comes to council expansion, thinking about how we can have a more uniformed and united front between the residents and the representative. And so those are the 4 values of council expansion that we are considering, in addition to our range of single member districts between 23 to 31 districts. And greater details about our recommendations can be found in the materials that will be sent out following our presentation. And of course, there will be a Q&A that we have that you can feel free to ask questions. I'd be more than happy to answer, but I'll turn it back over to Rigo to continue us with our presentation.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Maria. As you can see, there has been a lot of work done based on the community input. The question is, where do we go from here? What are the future actions? And for that, I'll turn it back to Candace, who will highlight the future actions of this group.
Thanks, Rigo. So we in this Zoom room know that LA needs change. And we've talked to you a lot about what we heard from all of our earlier convenings, that this change needs to be systemic, it needs to be structural, it needs to be in the constitution of the city, the charter. So how do you change the charter of the city? So first, the city council has to propose a change on one of our ballots. So we can vote either in March during the primary or November during the general election of next year. And you all may remember voting in the primary or in the general election the last time around in 2022. So our goal is to really get this on a ballot that is presented to voters. So those of us in the room who are registered to vote or can register to vote in the future. In order to do that, the city council needs to say, we want to see this on the ballot. In order for the city council to say, we want to see this on the ballot, the committee that's in charge of researching this issue needs to make a proposal to the full city council. So that's where we were today. You can see the date, August 10th. Our coalition was presenting to this committee and telling this committee everything we learned from talking to all of you. So for example, many of you said, if we have an independent redistricting commission that draws the lines of the 15 or however many council districts in the city, it needs to be inclusive. So we were there today in City Hall, in the council chambers, telling them you need to be inclusive. That means, for example, that you should not require commissioners to have voted in previous elections, which is like a very common requirement of serving on an IRC. Because when you require voting, that means you're disenfranchising people who are not US citizens, or you're restricting people who were formerly incarcerated from being able to serve. So we were carrying that message today. The next step is actually the state has just changed. And on August 28th, the chief legislative analyst, who is like the research staff for the city council, is going to present some recommendations to this city council committee. And their recommendations are going to hold a lot of weight. And then next month on September 18th, the committee is going to put forth their recommendations to the full city council. And then the city council has to decide what to do, whether to put something on the ballot, and if so, in March or in November. Next slide, please. So we know that having an independent redistricting commission or having more than 15 council districts is not, it's not like waving a magic wand. It's not a silver bullet. It's not going to fix everything we need to fix in LA City. We know that it's a first step, but it's definitely not a last step. And we know that, and we heard from so many of you that there are other ideas on the table that we need to seriously consider. So some of those ideas that we've heard are, for example, next slide, having campaign finance reform. It costs a lot of money to run for office in the city. Like that's why usually it's really hard to win elections unless you're independently wealthy or you take money from big donors. So we need to make it easier for people who are not rich or powerful to run for office and win. There are also ideas we heard from all of you around empowering the Ethics Commission. So this is an independent commission that's supposed to help keep our elected officials accountable and ethical. So maybe some ideas might be trying to empower this commission. So that way it's costlier to do unethical things in the city. And then finally, another set of ideas we've heard from all of you is to make sure that we have budget reform. So how a city decides to spend its public dollars really reflects what the city values. So if the city's spending most of its money on the LAPD, that tells us something about what the city values. So maybe one of the ideas on the table is that we make sure that any city budgets are organized with principles of racial justice and racial equity at their center. And I think I now pass it off to someone, but I'm not sure who. Is it Rigo? Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Candice. So I know we've shared a lot of information and a lot of things that are happening. And so we're about to wind down now and get you into some small groups to have a discussion. But I do want to end this piece by sharing with you that we are about to start a new round of convenings with you. So we want to bring you together again for about 2.5 hours as a group, and there we want to be able to get your thoughts on all these things that you heard. You know, today was just giving you a progress update, but we want to spend some time getting your thoughts around what you heard today from the recommendations related to political representation. And we also want to start getting your thoughts, collecting your thoughts on this last thing that Candice brought up, which is how do we really improve City Hall beyond just political representation, right? So for that, we've got a whole number of sessions that are coming up. As you can see, at the very end of today's session, we'll go over these convenings. So for that, let me, now that we've shared a lot of information, we're gonna go into small groups. And Christian, I think we're gonna do 15 minutes. I'm gonna ask that you all indulge us by maybe giving us an extra 5 or 10 minutes when we come back. So we're gonna go into small groups now. And what we want to do in the small groups is just ask you what kinds of questions you have, what reactions, how do you feel about what you heard, any ideas that you have. So we'll spend about 15 minutes just making sure that you have some time to think about what you heard. And then we'll come back as a large group, and then we'll tell you about the next steps again. So for that, we're going to go into breakout rooms. And for those of you, the way we're going to do this is you're going to go to the organization that you are affiliated with or that you participate with. And if you don't have an organization that you're connected to, then go to the Catalyst one, the one that says Catalyst. And then para los que prefieren, for those that want to have an all Spanish one, you're going to go to group 5 and 6. And I think that's being translated into Spanish. I just slipped into Spanish. So again, if you want to have, if you want to be part of a group that only speaks Spanish and English, Spanish only, then go to group 5 or 6. Other than that, you would go to the group that has the organization that you're a part of. And if you're not affiliated to an organization, then just select Catalyst as your option. Christian, can you go ahead and move us into those groups?
Sure. So they should be open now, and you can select whichever group you would want to go to.
Oh, you don't.
Okay.
I don't see
All
no
right. So
group.
let's go ahead. Okay.
Where's my phone?
And so if you can go to your group right now, that would be great. If you can mute your
There it is.
yourselves, and then if you have any questions, just
I
stay
don't
in
see
this
any
room, and
groups
then
at
I
all
believe
listed.
Christian will help
see
you. Yeah.
Sure. So there should be an option for you to select your room right now. You don't see that, Miss Isabel?
Miss Isabel, you have to go down to where is probably the three dots, and then it'll say breakout rooms, and then you could choose amongst the breakout rooms.
3 dots. Okay, I see the 3 dots. More.
It should say breakout.
Join breakout room. Okay, thank you.
Christian, could you read out the breakout rooms? I only see because I'm joining on the phone. So it says group 1, CD Tech Catalyst, and that's all I see. I don't see what.
Yeah. It's kind of a long description. So group 1 is CD Tech, Catalyst California, and LA CAN. Group 2 is ICS, California Native Vote Project, and ABC. That's group 2. Group 3 is LA Voice and CBPN and COCO. That's group 3. Group 4 is AEA, so API, LA Forward, Chirla. That's group 4. And then group 5 is the Spanish speakers with Alejandra, and also group 6 Spanish speakers with Rigo.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
If you say don't have a group, go to number 1.
Correct. Yeah. So if you don't have a group organization that you're part of from the ones that I said, select group 1.
Thank you.
Oh, Christian, it looks like there is a hand up from Adriana. I believe you're muted.
Oh, Adriana, do you have a question?
Sí, no me está dejando, no me está dando opción dónde meterme a los grupos. Perdón.
Ah, ok. La voy a poner en uno de español. ¿Está bien?
Sí, está bien. Español,
Ok.
please.
Gracias. Anybody else in the main room need help going to a breakout group?
I do,
sir. I'm not in the group.
Okay, where would you like to go? Which organization are you affiliated with?
Huh?
Which organization are you affiliated with?
It don't matter, sir. I'm willing to go to whatever one, no matter.
All righty, I will put you in one right now, and then you can join.
All right. All right.
So you should have gotten a notification to join the group.
I got it. Thank you.
Hello. I don't know how to get on the group. Can you just put me on the group? I'm with Coco.
Okay, sure. Francisco, give me a second. No. Yeah,
Thank you.
there you go. You should get a notification. Jane, I see your message in the chat. Which organization are you a part of, or are you familiar with, Jane? Innocence Drug. Okay. Anybody else need help in the main room?
Sorry, I didn't get the notification. How does that look? Do I go to the more, or because I go to the more with the questions and answers, but I don't see no link, or
It should just
okay,
pop up.
now I see it.
Okay, there you go. Does anybody else need help joining a breakout group right now? I did not get a notification either. So Nabil, which group would you like to join? Which organization? Okay.
One more person who can talk about a root condition, Miss Ana.
Yo creo que a pesar de la historia en la que hemos vivido todo este tiempo, en las condiciones de falta de ayuda y apoyo de la ciudad, hemos visto a través del video que gente con esa pasión estuvo trabajando y luchando en ese tiempo. Pero no hubo un seguimiento de seguir sobre el mismo. Esta generación que está aquí, que ya vivió esas consecuencias, y darle seguimiento. Porque hubo la necesidad en ese sistema que no se empoderó a la educación.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for giving us an extra bit of time. I know everyone's really, really busy. We just want to start closing by again reminding you and letting you know that we are going to be organizing a whole number of community sessions so that we can continue to hear from you what you think about the efforts to increase political representation, but also to make sure that City Hall is really responsive to our needs. I won't go through each one of these sessions, but you might want to take a picture. The first one is coming up next Thursday in Central LA through CD Tech. Thank you, CD Tech, for that. Followed by August 24th at Coco, and so on and so forth. Given that we're over time, let me just get over to the actions that we're asking you, and then I'm going to ask Pastor Eddie if he can close us with a reflection. So just some actions that you can take after today is, of course, sign up for one of the sessions that's coming up. But if you can share the recording and the materials that come from the session, those of you that are here today, you'll get a link to the recording. The other is if you can attend one of those sessions and recruit more people to attend, the more people that attend, the better, because this is about mobilizing our community to make sure that our communities pressure City Council and others to make these decisions. And then lastly, when you get all the materials like these slides, make sure that you read them so that when you attend the in-person session, you can let us know what you like about the recommendations, what's missing, and then anything else that you want to share, because you're such a valuable and important member of our community. With that, let me pass it back to Pastor Eddie to close us off with some reflections. So Pastor Eddie?
Yeah, we just want to thank all who presented. We want to thank Candace. We want to thank Rigo. We want to thank Maria, Jeremy, David, Catalyst. We want to thank each and every one of you for showing up on tonight, knowing that your voice is your power and that this is a city of angels. And while our wings may be clipped from all the corruption, that when we become an army of angelic troublemakers, we can really change the charter and make new rules for our community. So we need you to spread that message, invite your friends along to be part of this citizen revolution that we are creating together, and that together we will create a Los Angeles that works for all of us, that is equitable and represents us. Thank you again for being in the house. We will see you at one of the convenings as we go deeper to make an LA that works for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And if you have any questions about today's session, here is the contact information if you need any of your questions answered. But thank you so much and have a wonderful, wonderful evening.